Well, I'll put my timer on. Because much like the other ladies, my topic is not particularly sexy. But you know what that made me reflect on? Why do we think some of our businesses aren't sexy? And that's not even in my keynote. So my name's Cass. You can call me Cassandra. I have been working in media and marketing for coming into 19 years. I might not look it, but my Botox is pretty good. I've worked in big businesses, I've worked in small businesses, I've started my own business. I was super lucky. I got to cut my teeth on brands like Victoria Coffee and Lion Nathan. Amazing place to start. Premium brands, good quality, everything. Fast forward, I went over to England, and if you're English, you might know the Young's Pubs estate. My job was to look after over 500 pubs who rolled out a digital strategy. I looked after a lot of developers, and you've all in business, so you've all dealt with a developer, and you understand that they can be very special creatures to work with. Fast forward, in 2017, I returned back to Australia. I went home to Griffith in New South Wales with my husband, an English guy, and I was trying to get a job. Overqualified, couldn't do anything, so I started my own marketing agency. And that's when stuff really started to happen. I don't do a lot of public speaking. I've put myself under pressure for the next 6 months, so just bear with me. But what I've done in that period of time is I've won a lot of awards. I've exited another company, I've created startups, I've helped other people start businesses. One of my tech tools is just taking shy of $1 million on my tech, which is amazing. But the thing that not mine yet, but soon. But one of the things that I've worked out by running remote and hybrid teams is the tools that we've been sold by enterprises to run our businesses on are actually costing us a lot more money than we think they are. Now, I'm going to ask you the question. Have you ever asked or been asked the question, how long did that take? How much did that cost? Having worked as a project manager, my timer. Having worked as a project manager and fulfillment, agency director, agency owner, I've been on the receiving and on the giving of that question. And I tell you what, it feels like shit, especially if you're on the fulfillment side, because you're like, I feel undervalued, like my boss doesn't think I'm doing a good job. And then as a manager, when you ask that question, you are pretty much saying, what did you do all day? So what I want to talk to you about is where our profits are leaking from in our businesses. And I've watched it in my own, I've watched it in other companies, and that's why I built CanTicket. They're coming from managing our clients. They're coming from micromanaging. Internal job cards that aren't being updated. Missed schedules of work. Unquoted work that we're doing. Oh, they're a really good client, but I'll just do this little bit extra. Redo work. Bottlenecking in your businesses. Chasing updates from team members who don't leave updates. Absenteeism. And missing receipts. That's not productivity, it's operational chaos. So who needs to hear this? Like, I live in agency marketing land, so if you're selling time for services, social, web, even accounting, this is a message for you. Obviously it's not for everyone in the room, and I appreciate that, so just hang in, I'm sure I've got a nugget for you somewhere. So essentially, if you're paying anyone, like, who's got a VA? Be honest. Who's got more than one? Who's always really happy with the redo work? No one's got their hand up. Good point. So one activity I've got for us is to talk about our death by 1,000 subscriptions. We've got time tracking, we've got project management, we've got our invoicing system, and you've got your add-on for your expenses tracking. You've got project management, you've got CRMs, you've got receipts collecting, you've got 7 apps on your phone to run your business. But really, how many of you at the end of tax time have done your P&L and looked at how many subscriptions you're paying for? Honestly. 6 years ago, I worked out, actually, my accountant pulled me in and goes, Cass, what the fuck did you spend $17,000 on in software subscriptions? I was like, no way. And he's like, what's this? Monday, Clockify, blah, 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 blah. And I was managing a team of 12. And that's when I looked at it and was like, shit, how many other people are spending a fortune on software subscriptions that actually aren't making them money? So I've done a few different incubators over the years, and one of them in particular, I had to call 500 marketing agencies and talk to them about their tech stacks. So we worked out, on average, a business in agency land will spend about $75 per staff member on software subscriptions to run their business. You think about it, and I'm sure people in this room will have some people who do 10 hours a week, some who do 20, some who do 38, and you're paying per seat, on average, $75 a head. Doesn't matter if they're doing 10 hours or not. That money adds up. Death by 1,000 subscription. Not only that, there's also that time leakage. How many of you, sorry NBN lady, but how many of you have felt frustrated when you're watching all your apps loading and you're waiting for the load? As a person paying the wages, you've got staff sitting there in front of their computer waiting for 4 or 5 apps to open, and they just sit there waiting. There's 2 minutes, there's another 2 minutes, there's another 2 minutes, and that's tool switching. And that's time leakage. Bit of a chat that's happening on LinkedIn at the moment. And that's because our tools weren't designed for efficiency. We digitally duct tape all these different solutions together, and that's why I call it death by 1,000 subscriptions. Now, I want to talk to you about a particular job, and CanTicket is all about time. Time is money, and I'll go into that in a minute. But I outsourced a particular project because I didn't have the staff at the time to another marketing agency. And he said to me, onboarding's $2 grand. I was like, oh, okay, I know what's involved, but it's a good deal. No worries, I said yes. He came back to me and I said to him, how do you think that went? And he's like, yeah, it went great. And I said, well, I know you didn't work on it, but you sent me 5 different team members to talk about this. And I said, I don't think you made any money from that project. He's like, yes, I did, blah, blah, blah. And I was like, go and ask your team how much time they spent on doing that job. It was like an email marketing thing. And he came back to me 2 weeks later. He goes, 56 hours. That's $35 an hour. Doesn't cover most wages, superannuation, lights, toilet paper. At that point, I converted him over to using time tracking in his business. A lot of people don't realise, but KPMG have actually said that 70% of our projects fail. Overdone, underquoted, redos. But have you ever thought about how much work you're redoing in your business? That's where time tracking comes in. Now, I want you to honestly be honest with yourselves. I want you to write down the tools that you use daily. It might be Xero, MYOB, Canva, but more about the business operational tools. Are you using Monday, Cripe, Stripe, Asana, Basecamp, Harvest, Trello, any of them? So you've got 2 minutes. Just write them down. Just chuck your hand up when you've made a little bit of a list so I've got an idea. Think about all the different tools that your teams are using. Quoting, task management, your approval systems, your internal comms. If you're doing time tracking, invoicing, what's HR using to get their timesheets? Estimate how many logins that is per person, per day. Now I want you to have a look at how many minutes per day you use these tools for. So like in a marketing agency, we do a lot, like there's a lot of tool switching because every client will have their own their needs. So you might have to switch. What are those, how much time is spent now? Think about how much time is spent on missed tasks or unclear responsibilities of your team in fulfillment. How much time is spent re-entering information when it's been put in the wrong place? I'm sure we can all appreciate that. How much time you spend waiting for approvals? Not so much when you're the owner, but think about some of your team members. They're not moving fast enough because they're waiting for somebody else to approve it. How much time is spent manually, the sales or accounts are writing the quote? How long does it take to get from quote to job card to execution to invoicing? I'm sure you've got quite a lot of apps there and you've got quite a lot of minutes. If you can honestly say that you reflect on that and you're very happy with all that time every day that's being spent inefficiently that you're paying for while your team sit there and wait. How much tools are causing a lot of double handling? I've talked with businesses who run 2 different project management softwares in the same organisation. And I was like, well, how do you get the information from one person to the other? And it's like, oh, we copy and paste. I'm like, that's someone's whole job. Australian wages are expensive. And honestly, VA wages are cheaper, but there's a lot of redo work. So does that actually add up viably? Not in my book. These are things that nobody talks about. And honestly, if I knew the girls from Mummy and Me a few years ago, I probably would have jumped on board earlier. Because we start businesses to solve a problem. But no one is out there. Everyone's selling, do this lead generation course, study this and become great at this, work out how to do this and make more leads, make more money, meet these people. But they don't tell you to look at your back-end systems and look at the tools you're using and how they're actually costing you money. They're not making you money. You spend a lot of time for chasing missing work updates. Who's ever had a team member go on holidays for 2 or 3 weeks or on mat leave and leave no updates for the rest of the team? I have. Not recently, but a few years ago, definitely. Or people go on holidays and there's no handover notes. The other thing to think about is, like in our business ops and project management in particular, are we actually calculating the price, our staff costs versus our retail costs of what we're selling the labour out as? For example, you might have a social media manager on staff. There might be about $35 an hour, mid-weight-ish, plus their super and everything else, and you will retail them out for $125 to $145 an hour, kind of depending on your geographical location. But if you're not overlaying those projects with time tracking and your real costs versus your retail costs, how do you know if your projects are actually viable or not? You don't. You're running on gut instinct, especially if you're not accounting for redo work. So something to think about there. And how often, actually out of curiosity, who's in like design, web, social media marketing, in those types of businesses overall? Well, there's only a couple of us. But how many times have you said, oh, the client just needs this, I'll just squeeze it in on top, and there's 10 hours at $125 an hour? That happens a lot in our type of industry, and I'm sure it happens in others as well. And that's just revenue that's just leaking out the back door because you're trying to be helpful. Now it'll come round on the next project. It'll come round on the next project. But what if it doesn't? Either way, you've done the work, invoice for it. We do get caught doing out of scope work a lot in this industry as well. Oh, but you know, really need help with this, and it's 4:30 on a Friday afternoon. Invoice for it. It's not free work. So, age-old message, time is money, time is profit. Timesheets are needed for payroll. Time budgets are used for quoting projects. For example, a website, a standard Shopify website, 100 SKU products, organic SEO, custom design and build. Roughly will take, 4 years ago, take about 120 hours for a decent developer to deliver that kind of work. Now with the tech changes, you're looking closer to 150 to 180 hours for responsiveness. But if you don't have a backlog of information of how long it actually took your team to do it, how do you know that you're quoting appropriately or properly, or that your project is going to run to budget? Because you can't just keep saying, yeah, the budget is $7,000, build the website, bunch of shit goes wrong, who's paying for all the mistakes? Clients aren't paying for the mistakes. You are. You're the business owner, and you could replicate that in a lot of different industries. I really focus on time spent versus time allocated to find efficiencies in team members, in projects, in clients, which echoes into lots of different areas in business operations. Because if you're not tracking time, you're just guessing, and that is not a business, that's a hobby. The unintended superpowers of business operations, especially when you're using these systems. Oh, my thing's not on the screen. Is that it actually identifies underperformers in your organisation. It also exposes your over-serviced clients. Unintentionally, it also stops time stuffing and wages leakage. Again, because more people put their hands up for the VAs. Yes, there are some awesome ones. There's also been some terrible ones. Been working with remote work actually for closer to 12 years now. And one thing that is really clear is time stuffing. And it can even happen from your domestic staff. I put 5 hours on this job card, I put 3 hours on this job card. Hey, there's my 8 hours. But as a business owner, and you go, what do you mean you only moved the logo from the left-hand side to the right-hand side all day? But when you use business operational software, they become more accountable to what they're doing. And they actually have to subconsciously justify how they're earning their wage. It's not intended, but it's just one of the hidden superpowers of project management. It also includes your team focus and their efficiency because it's transparent. So some of my values are transparency, honesty, and accountability. And that's what's built into CanTicket. Team members become more transparent and honest with what they're doing. They also become more efficient because they're competing against each other. And when you clean up your business operations and your tech stacks, you can increase your invoice values because you actually know what you're working for. Now, just as indication, who's using Trello? Who's using Basecamp? Well, if you were, I'm going to come after you. Trello too. Clockify, Slack, Asana. Yeah, there's quite a few. So you know the space I'm talking about. These tools weren't designed for SMEs. They were designed for enterprises who are quite used to having 70% of their projects fail. And that's where CanTicket stands apart in the market. I have been working in the trenches for 19 years in 4 main companies. There's Intel from being literally the coffee bitch, working up to a project manager and head of production, account management, directorship, and ownership. And there's different features inside these tools that allow you to do that in one place. And no, I'm not from Silicon Valley, I'm from Griffith. I'm sure, yeah. But I've got global experience as a project manager, and I'm really fucking smart. And I can be really awkward as well, so I'm sorry about that. But I've really bootstrapped this from a regional town. I sat next to the head of Asana's technology at an event for Smart Company about 2 months ago, and we had to go around the circle, and we talked about time tracking. And I said to him, when he worked out what I was doing, he's like, and I said, you can't build time tracking into Asana. That's why you have to integrate it with blah, blah, blah. And he goes, how did you work that out? And I was like, well, I approached it practically and logically. I've used your tool. I understand how the tech works. And he goes, well, if you've worked that out, fuck, what's going to happen? And I'm like, I don't know, you tell me. But I'm not from those areas, come from the food region of Australia, amongst other things. But it was built by necessity. And what I did in that first year, once I scrapped all our operations and I made back my 17 grand plus a bit extra, and I bought my first luxury item. I was a very proud YSL bag. Cannot fucking find it for this weekend, but that's how I was able to turn an epic loss in a very small business to buying luxury goods for myself just by reassessing my ops and making my operational systems make money for me rather than just keep paying them out. So in any of our businesses, e-com, pets, freight, logistics, whatever it is, have a look at the tech stacks that you're using in your businesses. You need to really remove your time-consuming labour because we all know the most expensive part of our businesses are the people. Love it and expensive. How do you simplify your reoccurring tasks? Every one of you in here is doing some kind of marketing in your business. You don't do your marketing for December in December. You plan for it in October, and it's a reoccurring task that happens in your business, whether it's email marketing, whether it's social media marketing. So if you've got time-consuming labour of making job cards or allocating it out to people, these are things that you can automate and just make them happen on autopilot. You want to have a system that forces your teammates to do the right thing. So instead of always having jobs and boards, like CanTicket, someone asked me yesterday, what's it called? And it's like, because there's a checklist, it's a play on words, like you can literally tick it off. Have a system in place that moves it from ideation to completion to invoiced and gone. It's important to think about our financial budgets also in our business ops. What does stuff cost? What do our redos cost? This also helps to measure our efficiency and not just manually overriding a job to say 100% completed. If you're using time tracking or a financial budget and you say, look, this should cost $1,000 in wages to do, once it gets to that point, the staff can't manually override it and keep bringing it back because they've only done one step. Once their wages keep chewing into their time tracking, you can actually see real project success, not manually override them. And instant reports. Has anyone ever had a client who didn't want to pay their bill? I have. You know how satisfying it is to spit out a report in 3 minutes and send it to them with every job card you've done for that calendar month and be like, these are all your job cards, this is exactly how much time was spent, here's your invoice, it's your turn. Very satisfying. Other software tools don't allow you to do that. That's why I built it. Project management software, also a business operational software, it's just not for projects. The behavioural change in teams is actually quite impressive. So I put my agency under management as of the 1st of June, and I wouldn't have been able to do that unless everyone was doing what they're supposed to be doing. I hate micromanaging. Nobody likes those questions I asked at the beginning. So there's AI scheduling, there's all cool workflows and stuff like that. But at the beginning of the day, every day, log onto the dashboard, can see who's at work, what they're working on, and what time they started. You don't have to ask those icky questions. So what have I been doing? I actually met Peace and Cathy when I went with them to Paris and London, 4 or 5 years ago, to talk about CanTicket, admittedly with slightly different colour palette. But I've just been ticking along in the background and pushing it. And don't get me wrong, had my own hurdles in life, in business and everything else. But more recently, I've just come back from Asia, talking to VA agencies and BPO processing officers about CanTicket, time tracking, project management and CRMs. And I had a cool conversation yesterday with one of the ladies about, the potential of moving to Asia, which is what I've woken up this morning and thinking, maybe more. But it was all self-funded. I was married. I left my husband when my baby was 4 months old. But I've done all this with 15 cents. So if you are building something, you could do it too. I did a branding workshop with a really good friend of mine, who also I met now at a tech event. And she said to me, Cass, you're a fisherman. And I was like, I fucking hate fishing. I was like, the only thing I like doing is babysitting the very cold esky. And she said, look, you're a fisherman because you don't just go and get the fish and you don't sell the fishing rods. You teach people how to become fishermen so then they can go and execute whatever it is in their own businesses. So if you want to grow your business, you need to be a fisherman, whether that's you're teaching your staff on how to do things properly or re-educating your clients on your network on how they could do things differently. Don't just take, give back and let people work out how to get further ahead themselves. Now, pitch time. We're not just a tool, but I do have a serious competitive edge. I'm not joking, I'm going after the Basecamp market. So if you're using project management systems, time tracking, CRMs and stuff like that, I do want to talk to you. And if you sign up, I've even got stubby coolers. So at the end of the day, I know that we were running late, so I'm aware. But so the real case uses for what I've done, it's for owner visibility, it's for managers who need to have control, teams who want clarity, they just want to come to work and know what they're supposed to be doing. They don't want to have to ask anyone. And clients, they want responsiveness. They don't want to be ignored. They want their emails or texts or whatever it is responded to so they can put it off their list. And that's a bit more of a breakdown. Because at the end of the day, systems are important. The less complicated, the better. And then that way you can understand your business efficiencies and the financials and stuff like that. So don't be a bottleneck. Simplify, automate, assign, complete, invoice faster and get paid. That's part of my, my ethos with CanTicket. So my recap. Where are you losing money in your business, agency or not? In your HR and timesheets. HR officers, and a lot of them I speak to, they're like, I have to chase 75 different people who've got incorrect timesheets. But when you use time tracking overlapped with your project management software, it's actually up to the staff member to make sure their timesheets are correct. You don't have to go and chase them. If it's wrong, they get paid wrong. The onus is on them. We don't have to babysit our staff to do everything. Underquoting our work. Have you identified how many times you've done that? How are you going to stop doing that? Look for it. Retainers that go over. Great if you're the client on the retainer, just paying out the set fee, but when you're on the fulfillment side, it costs you a lot of money. Especially you're trying to be helpful. It's not hard to say, whoa, this is out of scope now. Here's a quote, sign it off, then we're going to do it. That tool switching, moving between expenses tools, moving between project management, moving between Slack channels, moving between all the different systems. Try to keep things in the one place so that you're not losing that 5 minutes on every client or that 5-10 minutes loading, sitting there watching the screen. Because at the end of the day, you're paying the wages, not the staff. I've put redo in there twice. Again, not tracking your time spent, your costs versus your retail value of your wages. You're not tracking your expenses on job cards. I met a client a while ago, and one of the staff came up and they're like, oh, I've got these pile of receipts. And I was like, this big. And I was like, what does she expect you to do with them? He's like, oh, she wants me to reimburse. And I'm like, some of these are really old. Do you even have these people as clients anymore? He's like, I don't know yet. But if your staff are buying stuff and they're not attaching it to a project or passing on those receipts fast enough, and you can't, on-sell that or like re-invoice for that cost, that's just another cost that you don't know about as a business owner. So have a think about what your process is if your staff are buying things in. Are they getting their receipt to you? Are you assigning it to a client? Because at the end of the day, that's you paying that money out. Missed tasks and word deadlines, I'm sure we've all danced through those before. And you're bottlenecking your quote to job card to invoice creation, because usually that changes hands in growing businesses, and the faster you can move through them, the faster you get paid. So my final thoughts. Create a ticket or some way to measure in your system how much work your team is redoing. Put your cost rates, put your retail rates, and you'd be surprised, especially in the creative industry. And what I do is I put ownership back on our team. I'm like, this is how much value of the redo work. Can you please explain to me how you put 20 hours on this in the last month? Very awkward. They don't do it very often. But unless you have accountability, people just take advantage, whether they're amazing or not. Fix your leaks. Start with your people. Check out what systems you're using. Place, audit, improve, delegate, and then you can scale them. You need to monitor your team's efficiency. It's not productivity, it's efficiency. Again, moving a logo from left to right and that's all they did all day, not efficient. They can do that in 15 to 20 minutes, perfect. Understand that in a time value, but also monetarily. And if possible, and you're in the industry for selling professional services, what I did in my agency to grow, not so much CanTicket, but I grew a significant amount, was I actually scrapped all of our retainers and everything is by the hour. Make more money that way. So CanTicket is one place. As a tech stack in our agency, we use Google Workspace, this and Canva and that. Other than that, less places for people to have to save stuff, less places for the gentleman who does our accounts and timesheets to have to chase people. Everything's in the one place. Makes life easier, makes people more efficient, and makes you more money. So CanTicket is here to solve the problems you don't realise are costing you. Your client management, your micromanaging, rescheduling all those little tasks that never get done on a Friday afternoon, in creating all your internal job cards, tool switching, your HR and your timesheets.